The room was completely still. Not the kind of stillness that comes from peace, the kind that comes just before something irreversible happens. 4 adults stood around a hospital bed in a house that smelled of old wood and morphine. A man lay there, oxygen tube across his face, eyes moving from one face to the next. And then he spoke. 3 sentences. That was all it took. 3 sentences to unravel 47 years. In the autumn of 1977, Raymond Aldrich built a house on the corner of Mercer Street and Callaway Drive in Spokane, Washington. He built it himself, poured the foundation on a Saturday, framed the walls over 3 weekends. His wife, Patricia, brought coffee in a thermos and watched from a folding chair. Raymond was not a man of words. He was a man of things, of weight-bearing beams and level lines, and the kind of labor that leaves calluses for life. He worked at Inland Paper Mill for 31 years. Same shift, same locker, same walk home. They had 4 children. Margaret, born in 1961. Thomas in 1963. Carol in 1966. And Daniel, the youngest, born in 1971, the year Raymond almost left. Almost. The family never talked about that year. There were things in the Aldrich household that existed only as shapes in the dark, felt but never named. Patricia died in 2009, a stroke in the garden. Raymond never remarried. He kept her reading glasses on the kitchen counter until the day he was moved to the downstairs bedroom, oxygen tank beside the nightstand. By January of 2024, Raymond was 81 years old and dying of pulmonary fibrosis. The 4 siblings had spent decades managing the distances between them. Christmas cards instead of phone calls, voicemails instead of visits. But now they came. Margaret flew in from Charlotte. Thomas drove down from Portland. Carol arrived first, as she always did. And Daniel came last, carrying something no one could see, but everyone could feel the moment he walked through the door. They gathered around the bed of a man who had never once said the word sorry. And they waited. Not because they expected anything, but because there was nowhere else to go. On the second morning, Raymond asked Margaret to open the window. She did. January air came in, cold, sharp, honest. Raymond looked at the ceiling for a long time. Then he turned his head toward Daniel. "I need you to know something," he said. "All of you." His voice was barely a voice anymore, more like the memory of one. But the words were clear. He had been seeing a woman. Her name was Vivienne Marsh. She worked at the county records office on 2nd Avenue. Raymond had known her since 1969, 2 years before Daniel was born. They were together, on and off, for 11 years. The room did not react immediately. Shock, in families, rarely announces itself. It settles in like cold water, slow, complete. Carol looked at her hands. Thomas moved to the window Margaret had just opened and stared outside, jaw working without sound. Margaret pressed her lips together and said nothing. Daniel did not move at all. Raymond kept talking. His voice was exhausted but purposeful, the voice of a man releasing something he had carried so long it had fused to his bones. He said Patricia had found out in 1978. Not about Vivienne exactly, but about the other account. The money Raymond had moved, slowly, over 6 years. Enough to buy a second life, if he had wanted one. He hadn't wanted one. That was what he said. He stayed. But the account was never closed. The money was never returned. And when Patricia died, Raymond transferred what remained into a separate trust. A trust with one beneficiary. Margaret asked who. Raymond closed his eyes. Across the room, on the shelf beside the window, sat a framed photograph no one had ever asked about. A woman, mid-30s, standing in front of a yellow house. A child beside her, a boy, maybe 9 or 10, squinting into the sun. Carol saw it first. She had seen it 100 times over the years. She had always assumed it was a cousin, a distant relative, someone from Raymond's side whose name she'd forgotten. She walked to the shelf and picked it up. Her hands were shaking before she understood why. And that's when Daniel said the one thing no one in that room was prepared to hear. Daniel said, "I already know." No one moved. He said it quietly, without drama, as though he had been holding the words in his mouth for years and had simply grown tired of keeping them there. He had known since 2011. A letter had arrived at his apartment in Seattle. No return address, typed 4 paragraphs. It named Vivienne Marsh. It named the boy in the photograph. It named a sum of money and a law firm in Coeur d'Alene. Daniel had driven to Spokane that same week. He had sat across from Raymond at the kitchen table, 2 cups of coffee between them, and asked one question. Raymond had answered it. Then Daniel had driven back to Seattle and never spoken of it again. Margaret's voice came out stripped of everything except raw injury. "You knew for 13 years. Not a question. A verdict." Thomas turned from the window. His face had gone the gray of someone trying to hold back something physical. "Who else did you protect?" he asked. "Him or yourself?" Daniel didn't answer. He walked to the chair beside Raymond's bed and sat down. Raymond's hand was on the blanket. Daniel didn't take it. He just sat there, close, like proximity was the only currency he had left. Carol was still holding the photograph. The boy in it had Raymond's jaw, the set of his shoulders, the angle of his chin in the sun. Once you saw it, you could not unsee it. His name, Raymond said, was Nathan Marsh. He was 52 years old. He lived in Boise, Idaho. He was a high school principal. He had 2 daughters. He had never known who his father was until Vivienne died in 2010 and left him a sealed envelope with a name and an address in Spokane, Washington. Nathan had never come forward, never called, never written. He had simply absorbed the information and carried on. Just like Daniel. Margaret sat down on the floor, not dramatically, just down, as if her legs had made the decision without her. Raymond looked at the ceiling. "I wanted to die clean," he said. No one told him he had succeeded. Outside, a car passed slowly on Mercer Street. The sound of it fading was the only movement left in the room. And then Thomas found the drawer. Thomas had stepped to the nightstand to pour water. He pulled the drawer open looking for a coaster. There was no coaster. There was an envelope, unsealed, addressed in Raymond's handwriting, slow, deliberate, the cursive of a man writing with failing hands over many months. 5 names on the front. Margaret, Thomas, Carol, Daniel, Nathan. Thomas held it up without speaking. Raymond's eyes were closed, but he was not asleep. His chest rose and fell with the particular rhythm of someone waiting for something to end. Margaret took the envelope. She removed 5 folded pages, each one different, each one addressed individually. She handed them out in silence. What Raymond had written to each child was different. No one read their letter aloud. No one asked to see another's. Some things, even in the wreckage, remain private. But what Carol read, she told the others, years later, in pieces, was not a justification. It was a map. Raymond had written down in order every decision he had made and why he had made it. Not to be forgiven. He had written explicitly, "I am not asking for that." He wrote it to hand his children the one thing he had never given them while he was standing upright, the full shape of who he was. A man who loved his wife and failed her. A man who stayed not from devotion but from the particular cowardice of those who cannot endure the grief they cause. A man who had watched his son Daniel carry a secret for 13 years and had said nothing because saying something would have required Raymond to acknowledge what Daniel had sacrificed to protect a peace that was never real. The last line of the letter Carol shared was addressed to no one. It read, "The house on Mercer Street belongs equally to all 5 of you. Do with that what you can." Raymond died 4 hours later. The oxygen machine kept running for a few minutes after, a sound none of them forgot. Nathan Marsh received a phone call that evening. He drove to Spokane the next morning. He sat at the kitchen table where Raymond had once told the truth to only one of his children. He held the letter with both hands and read it twice. Then he put it in his jacket pocket and went to see the house. Some confessions don't heal anything. They just redistribute the weight. Raymond Aldrich spent a lifetime constructing a version of himself he could live inside. The moment he dismantled it, he was already leaving. And the people left behind had to decide, not whether to forgive a dead man, but whether to forgive themselves for all the years they spent not asking the right questions. If that landed somewhere in you, stay with us. There are more stories like this, and the next one is the kind you won't see coming.